Hello, so my name's Bob Davidson. I work for the London Wine Fair, which is the largest drinks trade event in the UK. This is, as far as I'm aware, the London Wine Fair's first webinar, and it's definitely my first webinar, so that goes to some way explanation if any of it's a little unorthodox. I'm trying to make this fairly simple for those people who haven't visited the UK, who don't know that much about the market. I'm sure there will be some of you who are fully aware of some of the details here, but everything will be available from sources and a little more detail after the webinar, so just please do get in contact. I'd like to start just with an overview of the UK alcohol industry. It's currently worth about £39 billion in sales over the year. That's about $60 billion. It's quite a substantial part of our industry and economy. There's over 200,000 licensed premises around the UK, and it employs nearly 600,000 people. The wine industry in the UK, it is the 6th largest wine market in the world. We are the 22nd largest population in the world. By populace, the UK really is one of the largest wine consumers, generally in the top 5 wine consumers per capita of any country in the world. I think the US is currently number 1, certainly France and Italy are up there as well. When we say we have 30 million regular wine drinkers, we have 65 million people in the population. About 15 of those are under 18, so technically shouldn't ever drink wine. And of course, about 10 million about over 70 or so. So it's about 3 in 4 people drink wine on a very regular basis. Currently generates 17.3 billion in economic activity, so around about the 25 to $30 billion. And in terms of what we drink, Australian wine is absolutely out there at the top, Australian wine comfortably. Second by France. This is a bit unusual in terms of geographical position. Most of the wine we drink comes from about 9.5, 10,000 miles away. France at our closest point, I think, is 21 miles away. But there are reasons for that. The USA is still up there, usually in the top 5. That's generally in bulk and larger high volume brands. There are 5 main trends I want to talk about today to touch on briefly. Particularly bulk wine is of interest. Over the past 10 years, bulk wine has had a significant impact on the UK wine market, significant impact on what people drink, and significant impact on buying patterns as well. Australia is absolutely leading that, as you've seen before. I'll go on to explain a little bit more about that, but California has certainly taken on board that too. The supermarkets have the largest share of the UK wine buying, both in volume and in monetary value. That again is mostly lower end own label stuff. Again, I will explain in a little more detail in a moment. They have been falling over the past couple of years. That sounds like a bad thing. In terms of American wine, that's quite a good opportunity, we think. Overall, over the past 5 years, since about 2010, a little bit before 2008, on-trade sales, so restaurants, pubs, bars, they have fallen. There is a bit more to that, I will explain in a moment. They are picking up again. Just the nature of people's drinking patterns is changing. The independent retail sector has increased. That is a massive area for growth at the moment. Massive interest in wine, a massive interest in different wines at different price points. And finally, the online retail sector in the UK is one of the largest. Japan, China, and the UK are leading the way for online retail for wine. The final 3 in that, I will explain why we really think this is a killer time for US wines to try to hit the UK market. So in terms of bulk wine, I'll just talk about this relatively briefly. This has been a really big thing since 2005. The Courtauld Commitment was an international agreement. We're now in phase 3 of it, where more wine is being transported in bulk to reduce waste from bottles and also to reduce carbon emissions. This is part of our green targets, and it has had a massive impact on the way people have bought wine. It's about 50 to 80% of imports from the New World. Most of it is the New World. There is some from Spain, there is some from Italy, but a large part of it does come from South Africa, Chile, Australia, and of course the US. The US has not quite caught on to this in the same way that Australia has. Australia is very much there at 80%. 8 out of 10 bottles of Australian wine in the UK have been brought here in a shipping container, which is why the Australian wine seems to be at the top of UK consumption. The US is a little bit lower, 50% or so. There is definitely an expansion possibility for growth there. And it's predominantly going into the supermarkets and own label brands. Some of the high volume as well that's brought in, but predominantly stuff that goes into our major supermarkets. Which brings me nicely to our supermarkets. For those of you who aren't familiar, there are 4 major supermarkets in the UK. The largest is Tesco, which you have in the US under the name Fresh and Easy, I believe. They take about a quarter of all the market. They're easily out there in the front. We also have Sainsbury's, which is second, Asda, which is owned by Walmart, and from what I can tell, quite similar. And then we also have Morrison's. There are a few others after that, which I'll get onto in a second. They did used to account until the last couple of years for the majority of wine sold in the UK. The vast majority of off-trade wine was sold through supermarkets, 9 out of 10 bottles. This has fallen, and the reason it's fallen is partly due to price, partly due to interest from other people, partly due to online competition, and partly because people are just generally drinking less. The UK is now per head per capita drinking less and less every year, but they are tending to drink a little bit more expensive or more adventurously. Now, the discount supermarkets we talk about are Lidl and Aldi. They're 2 German companies which have less branded goods, but generally at slightly cheaper price marks with slightly lower margins. Their growth has really grown. They're the 2 anomalies in the supermarket group. All of them over the last 6 months have dramatically reduced the lines that they sell. They've gone from about 900 to 600 in most cases. This is across the board. This is just trying to consolidate the bits of market that they currently have. And the general trend from supermarkets is less and less to take wines from specific wineries or from specific brands, but more to just bring in their own wines and label it their own way. Now, there's a few different parts of the on-trade. The first side is going to sound quite depressing, but let me explain why it's a good thing when I go on to it afterwards. Generally speaking, since about 2008, 2010, people are spending far less on going out. The reason they're spending far less on going out is because most people just don't have that much money. But there are some other reasons for it too. And the US wine sales on the on-trade have followed that figure. They've gone down in pretty much the same amount. Now, a lot of this has to do with pub culture. A lot of on-trade sales were done through British pubs. The nature of that has changed. 40 years ago, it was almost entirely a male-dominated environment in a pub, and they just drank local beer. Move forward a little bit, then some women would come in and they would drink some wine. Now that sort of culture is changing. The demographic of people going out, the style of the on-trade opportunity has completely changed. What we offer from pubs, they are shutting down unless they're keeping up with the times. That is a lot to do with the on-trade falling, which brings me on nicely to explain why inner cities with better food offerings, with better family opportunities, with a more progressive looking management have risen. This is where better wines are being served, higher point wines, wines with tasting opportunities to go with them. This really is a great opportunity, and it has really picked up over the last couple of years. It's predominantly led by people in Generation Y, so roughly around late 20s to mid 40s. These people have disposable income. These people are successful. They like going out, experiencing new things, generally quite foodie, and they really are leading the on-trade. Interesting to note that the biggest category growth has been Prosecco and other non-champagne sparkling wines. Prosecco particularly, it's had some discount deals, and also people enjoy drinking fizz when they go out. This is very much bucking the trend. It really has been a massive growth area over the past 5 years. As you can see from this one, it does point out where most of the on-trade opening has been It's almost exclusively in the larger cities, London, of course, but very much interested in Manchester, Birmingham, up north, Edinburgh. Where there are inner cities, where there's jobs, where there's finance, there are a lot of opportunities for growth. Now, independent retail, I'm not sure that we quite have in lots of parts of the States the same thing. These are just local shops specialising in wine. A lot of them are very old. A lot of them date back 300-400 years. The majority of them are quite new, which you can see there's 50% have started in the past 8 years. There's about 750, more than 10 in every city, of course, the majority are around London, but there are very few places that don't have their own independent merchant, quite often their own importer as well. So they may import their own wine, they may deal directly with vineyards, and they sell individual unique wines. This is where people who are interested in wine go to buy their wine. It's currently worth about 500 million a year. This is growing. This is serious. This is a massive growth sector, and this is where a lot of the mid to premium wine is sold. What really makes them stand out is that they generally have tasting opportunities with pneumatic machines. They often have wine schools. They often do some artisan food with it. They do something else to entice people coming back. These are shops where really people feel an engagement with the owner, and they keep coming back and trying and sampling new wines. It's very difficult to get any kind of any real data on independent retailers and what they sell, because they generally change their listings about every 3 months. There are many of those who have very loyal bins which they keep, and very loyal commitments to particular producers, but they generally try to have an interesting selection of wine all the time. But as I say, this really is a growth sector, and one which is very interesting, I think, to the US market. Online, as I said, UK is leading this. Currently, it's about 11% of all off-trade sales. That's much more than it was even 5 years ago. It's considered to grow exponential. In the first quarter of this year, it grew by nearly 30%. It really is a massive sector. Apparently 1 in 4 consumers, wine buyers, have bought wine online. Again, I think this is a lot to do with generation Y. Finding real data on age of people buying wine is quite tricky, especially to quantify, but certainly people who are more tech savvy, certainly people who are more financially liquid, really do often buy their wines this way. Now, in terms of the US wine exports, it's currently worth about $500 million globally in terms of dollars. Now, over a third of that comes to the EU. The UK is significantly taking over 50% of that third. So the UK is one of the largest importers in the world. I think it's second only to Canada, which, considering we don't share a border, is quite impressive. Yeah, it's nearly 16 million cases, 9-litre cases are shipped to the UK every year. I'd like to touch very briefly on some brands that we have, the biggest 4, and just explain where they've been going. Biggest one by a long way, Blossom Hill. Absurd amounts being brought in very high volume. To say that it's available in every shop in the UK would be an exaggeration, but it's in most of them. It's in a lot of them. It's not so much of interest to a lot of the independent retails, but certainly convenience stores and supermarkets. They will pretty much always have Blossom Hill. It has significantly decreased in volume and value served over the past 5 years. Although the sparkling wine, as we saw before, sparkling wine has really increased. There's a lot more interest in non-champagne sparkling wines. Echo Falls, it's followed a similar kind of trend to Blossom Hill. It's gone down about 25%. Gallo, again, the third most popular, that's gone down 5%, although Gallo does, of course, own Barefoot, which has gone up 300%, somewhat changing the trend there. I don't really know why that is, apart from marketing and market penetration, but this is the only one of the top 10 brands to the UK that's actually increased over the past 5 years. In terms of US wine drunk in the UK, volume, it is dramatically fallen. A lot of that has to do with large volume brands, as you'll have seen. It really has gone down. Less of it is being drunk, but what's really important is that the average price per bottle has seriously risen. There is much more interest in that mid to premium tier varietal wine, especially from interesting producers. Premium sales for wines over about £15–20 have risen by 30% in the past year. There's a lot more interest in this category. In terms of a very brief SWOT analysis on the UK market, I think it's fairly clear to point out that the UK has a very long established drinking culture. The Brits do drink a lot. Although we're 22nd largest population, we're generally in sort of 15th to 10th place for alcohol consumption per capita. Most of Europe is in that 15 places. I don't know why that is, but for anyone who's visited, I imagine the weather probably has something to do with it. It is a very developed wine market. As I say, we have wine merchants here from the 15th, 16th century. The UK has been importing wine for over 1,000 years. Before that, of course, even the Romans. The UK has a very long and established trade and structure and network for importing and selling wine. We also have a lot of consumers with a disposable income. The UK, I think London was considered in a recent poll to be the most expensive place in the world to live. There are plenty of other cities expensive, but London really does have a lot of money, a lot of very keen people willing to spend that money on wine. And particularly American wines have historically done well. There have been some, there are big brands that are used over here. We're used to hearing the names, Lodi, Napa, whatever. There are a lot of wines which people are comfortable with from the States. In terms of weaknesses, we have a lot of problem with US regulation and shipping. It just adds cost to the bottle. It is a terrible shame, and the use price points, if people can think they can sell their wines better locally than they are tempted to. As I say, there is a lot of potential for growth in that sector, but unfortunately this is a weakness that we have to try to overcome. We do have some quite high duty rates in the UK as well. We have just recently launched a campaign called Drop the Duty, where the Chancellor has frozen duty, and we have got a sort of a constant price on that for the next few years. Hopefully duty won't be too much of a problem in the coming years, or certainly get any worse. Another weakness is the market is pretty mature. As I say, it's long and developed, and it is expanding, but at the same time it is fairly mature. So in terms of getting new wines into it is difficult. Also, there are quite a few people here who just will only ever drink French wine or Spanish wine, whatever. They still have quite a backward European-looking viewpoint of the market. This makes getting in from New World wines a little bit difficult. To think it's only been about 30–40 years that we've been actually looking at particularly American wines, whereas we've been looking at French ones for, as I say, hundreds and hundreds. Opportunities. Well, we've got a very premium and burgeoning online market. Lots of people, as I say, are buying their wines online. They're also willing to trade up online, and I think people are more willing to experiment with wines if they can Google them and find out a bit more about them when they're doing it. And the on-trade, as I say, inner city on-trade is really a growing market. There are lots and lots of better trained staff. There are lots and lots of people with money going out to try them. There are lots of food pairing opportunities. And there's a serious growth in premium burger restaurants. I don't want to stereotype all American food. It's burgers, of course. But there is a real growth for things like meat, liquor, burger and lobster, GBK. There are lots and lots of new, very premium burger places with American-style food that I think would really suit American wines. There is a fairly old world dominant side to the market, as I said, but this can also be kind of an opportunity. There are some people who are getting a little bored with it. People like to experiment and like to try new things all the time. So I think there's a definite opportunity to get a much bigger share of that. I was discussing with one sommelier recently who out of 250 wines has 7 from the States. I was in an independent retail this afternoon discussing with one of my clients who has maybe 1 or 2 wines from the States out of his entire listing. There is a massive opportunity for growth in this area. I'm not sure if you can see this, but my computer is frozen. I apologize.
Hey, Bob, we can see you. If you just keep going forward, it shouldn't be an issue. You are
Okay, no,
live and
everything's frozen
clear.
now. Can you click forward, Zach?
Sure. It says new generation of wine savvy and engaging drinkers.
Oh, fair enough. No, okay. In that case, I've got some paper notes here, thankfully, so we'll go forward from there. Yeah, so as I said, there's a new generation of wine-savvy and engaging drinkers ready to try new wines, new wine pairings in the on-trade, in the independent sector, across the board. Anywhere there is something a little bit above entry price point, there is definitely a sector of people looking forward for that. Now, in terms of threats, as I say, duty and price are always going to be a serious threat. Although we have a word from the Chancellor that duty is not going to go up, that may change in the future. Also, we never know what's going to happen stateside. There's not a lot we can do about that. Emerging wine regions are an issue. There will always be a competition on price, and there'll always be a competition on the new exciting thing. Again, I think the quality of the wine should always speak for itself. So this hopefully shouldn't be too much of an issue, but it is always under the line there as a threat. And then finally, the interest in cocktails and other categories is a real problem. They may have bigger marketing budgets. People are always looking for new, interesting wines. There's been a massive growth in cider, for instance. So people do look for different drinks. I'm going to touch very briefly on the fine wine market in the UK. This is a very tiny amount of sales in general, but it is a growing one for the US. There's obviously the wines like Screaming Eagle, Holland Estates, which have always been cult classics that people collect, but it is growing in the UK. They're taking a lot more interest in other fairly well established but still very premium, super premium, ultra premium wines. The LiveX, the London International Vintners Exchange, they include Dominus and Opus 1 as part of their LiveX 1000, which is a general trend for fine wines across the world. They're seeing more and more users from and traders from the US, and more US wines traded on it. And people are looking at them for investment potential. There's a possibility that a number of them speculatively may go up in the next few years, especially if they get more of a UK and EU grounding. Hopefully, there is some investment potential there for the very top wines. Now, very finally, I'd like to start explain a little bit about the London Wine Fair and why we're explaining this. So the Wine Fair is older than I am. The Wine Fair has been going for 35 years. It's the largest drinks trade event in the UK, and it attracts about 12,000 visitors every year. The buyers come from every channel, particularly from the independent and on-trade sectors, as I said, and a lot of the online buyers. Also, a lot of the private client side have come in it, and then buyers from every single supermarket will be there, every multiple retail. We attract about 20,000 visitors. 20% of visitors come from overseas. So this is particularly from countries like Ireland, Scandinavia, Belgium, Holland, etc. Anywhere where there's an import market. And they're almost exclusively buyers from those countries. In fact, about 84% of the visitors we have have some buying responsibility. So this concludes my webinar. I'm not sure quite what you can have seen of it, but yeah, this is everything we have here. But as I say, we are the vehicle to meet the UK market. There is an absolute gap in the market for lots of mid to premium tier American wines with the right quality, with the right story behind them, and there are people looking out for these and wanting them. This is the time when independent retail, when on-trade really are growing and they're looking for these wines. We would love you to come and visit the Wine Fair, and we would love you to come and meet some buyers. Thank you.